Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
Gentlemen, I'm really happy that we all came to the party today with the agreed attire that was at our last production meeting. Of course, it's Grey Shirt Sunday. And that's about all I've got to say about it, because now we all look like one bland colour palette, which is fantastic.
Adam,
well, which a grouping of three white men doing a podcast. I think a bland grouping is kind of the acceptable, like, plural noun for that.
Yeah, it's three white guys doing a podcast, otherwise known as that's the noun, like a murder of podcasts. That's what you.
Yeah,
that's the collective.
I thought actually I saw that podcast should be the collective noun of just a group of white men, which is also hilarious.
A podcast of men, or
just a podcast of men. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that impressively visual joke for this largely audio medium.
Yes. Don't worry, I'm here getting all angles of our audience. So we've ticked off one box. Let's move to the next.
And the next is?
The next being?
The ones that like the jokes, I guess, because everything up to this point has been not that funny. So take it away, guys.
Do you mean the 90 seconds we've been doing this episode, or the 10 years up to this point?
Take your pick.
Because it could be either, if we're being really honest with ourselves.
Both of those are fair answers. I'll take that as a comment, as Tony Jones would say.
Yes. Good old, let's move on as the conversation gets interesting, Tony Jones. So it's been a week. I know we say that most episodes, like,
every
for another week. Oh, what a week. But goddamn, has this week been a week. You
know what I'd really like? I'd really like just a quiet week where we come to the show on a Sunday and we do the recording and we're just like, not much this week, was there? And it would be like, no, I just led my normal life and I didn't have to worry. There was no existential angst at all. I didn't have to worry about politicians.
Story. Yeah, a koala was found on the freeway and...
look, here's a surfing dog.
Accident. Actually, that did happen. There was the koala story, was a thing, and it was very funny. But no, bigger things happened in the past few weeks, particularly this week.
So we left everyone last week on a bit of a cliffhanger, which was, who is the Parliament House alleged rapist? No one knows. In terms of the minister, that being there's another one that everyone does know about.
Hell of a Bold and the Beautiful style cliffhanger there. Like, who's the rapist in Parliament? Tune in next week to find out.
Yeah. And we didn't mention any names on the show last week, but we had
which was very responsible of us. Can I just say, unlike some of the Twitter comments where people are like, it's fucking Christian Porter, everyone knows it is, you dumb cunts. We decided to do a bit of holding back and wait till the thing was sort of properly announced before we started, talking about it on the show.
Shit on the individual.
So the alleged rapist is Attorney General Christian Porter, and I just want to say I fucking called it. Like, I know there's no evidence of this.
We were all on the same page after last week's episode. We all sort of signed off on the live thing. We're like, so it's Christian Porter, so we were all on the same page with that. And I think after particularly, the track record of allegations and stories that have come out about him in the past, seemed like the obvious choice, and it turns out we were right. By his own admission, he is the person named in the letter, because he fronted up in front of the press last Wednesday to confirm as much. And what a press conference that was.
And when you say to confirm as much, you mean to say, obviously, that he denied the allegations?
That was alleged. Yes. To say that he, everyone was wondering, who's the MP who was mentioned in the letter? And he fronted up to say, it's me who was mentioned in the letter. Didn't do the thing, though. Was very much his stance.
I did have some outside money on Michaelia Cash, but, 500 to 1, if it pays off, like, obviously, the odds are in your favour there. It's unlikely, obviously, what with her, being a female and all, but, the payoff was so good, I couldn't resist. I'm just a big fan. I'm an aspirational guy. I like moonshots.
it's funny you joke about betting on politics like that, but I'm pretty sure there are markets in certain applications which allow you to do that. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, like every time there's an election, people are taking bets on it. Like and I don't know if specifically there were bets on as to whether or not it was Christian Porter who was going to come out and do the thing. That's morbid. But yeah, no, people bet on that sort of stuff all the time. But did you guys watch the press conference as it happened?
No, not as it happened. I saw stuff after.
Okay, no, I flicked it on my second monitor. I was like, this is a pretty historic kind of moment.
Someone's got a second monitor going on. Just,
you don't have multi-monitor set up for work?
No.
Oh, wow.
It's all right.
It's hard to go, not to derail the conversation too much, but it's hard to go back to one monitor after it's pretty wild.
Once you go gigabyte, you never go back. Gigabyte has an ultra-wide monitor.
That's a computer
First
joke.
one, 3 gigabyte.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I know this is obviously a very serious subject matter that we're about to embark on, but can I just say, can we all spare a moment for Adam, the real victim of the pandemic, having to do his work with one monitor? That's really...
Yeah.
Let's, thoughts and prayers. I hope you make it through this difficult time. We're all thinking about you.
Don't give me your prayers, George. Give me real action. Come on, mate.
All right. I've got a BenQ monitor sitting around here if you want a second monitor.
I don't think I'd have any ports connected up with because I've got the other one. But anyway, whatever.
You would. Okay. Anyway.
Not important.
You're doing this to yourself at this point.
Not important.
So the press conference.
Yes. I don't know it was not what I expected. I don't know what you guys expected.
Were you expecting the for the singer from USA's The Voice season 4, Christian Porter? Different Christian Porter, as it turns out. This Christian Porter is the chief law officer of Australia, but
yes. So no, not the right. Did you just Google the name Christian Porter to pick another one out? Just
maybe
for that gag? Maybe. Like now or pre-show?
Are you having a go at me for preparing?
Or did you just Google Christian Porter through a VPN on a US?
I Googled Christian Porter and it said for the singer, see the voice, US season 4. And I just wanted to
than the Governor General.
Sorry, say again.
Does he have better SEO than the Governor General?
No. Christian Porter, the
Attorney General.
The Attorney General of Australia is getting a slightly more search engine juice in this last week for some reason. So I think he might have pushed the voicing a little bit further down the list just for this week, at least.
Yes. But no, the press conference, it was not what I expected. I expected, what we see all the time when this sort of thing happens.
Stage 2, I'm welcoming the inquiry. I have the full confidence of the government.
More that they come out and they say, like, I strongly deny the allegation.
Wasn't me. Budging on me on the counter.
I won't be taking questions. Like, just here's my prepared statement. It is firm and cold and just all that sort of stuff. And then they leave. But he seemed to take a different approach, which is debatable whether or not it was genuine. And that's what a lot of people have been focusing on. But seemed to take the approach of expressing how, scared, upset, and, bothered he was by the allegation that he has raped someone.
It's you know what it is.
See that often.
It's the argument that when you're clearly lying, allegedly, where you come in and you just go, I am, not only did I not do the thing, but I am just outraged that you would even say that about me. That's really hurtful. Other person making some benign allegation. I can't even believe that you would think that of me. And to show how truthful I am, I'm going to show you how very upset I am about this. It's the Brett Kavanaugh. I can't even believe that my outrage and level of emotion should be an indicator of my lack of guilt and nothing else. Certainly not my genuine fear of actually being caught and prosecuted for this crime.
Yeah, Brett Kavanaugh was the last example that I could think of where I saw something similar. So that's sort of how it went down. It was very much more he was openly showing frustration and all that sort of stuff, seeming like trying to show more emotion in his response than just which, given he's the chief law officer of the country, I expected the most calculated the most calculated response you could do to be like, everything I'm saying emphatically denies what happened, but is like bulletproof in terms of like legal precedents and all that sort of stuff. So it wasn't that, but also, I don't know, personally, I feel Christian Porter seems like the kind of person who would know that and is using that as a strategy.
I'm sorry. This is from the guy who was voted in his uni group to be the most likely to go down for a sexual harassment inquiry, if I'm very not much mistaken. So this is a quality that
not what you want.
No,
as a huge red flag.
As a human, like you don't ever want to have that as a little addendum next to your name. Most likely to go down for a sexual harassment complaint as a government minister.
One of the letters trailing your uni degree name of like, like blah, 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 PhD, honours, most likely to be...
Voted most likely to go down in a sexual harassment scandal.
I feel like that old whatever book or thing that's from is like some sort of weird prophetic,
Should we get the lotto numbers out of it? Like, obviously, it's like when every time something happens in world news and they're like, oh, The Simpsons called it. It's like some obscure episode from like 1994 where Donald Trump is the president, or you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those
the
things.
Russian octopus pulls out the winner of the World Cup or something.
The soccer predicting octopus. But so that was the press conference. He covered a lot in that.
He took questions, right, as well.
Yes, he did take questions, and the play from that front was, obviously journalists were grilling him on a lot of the specifics of the allegations that they have gotten, both from the letter and testimony from friends, because, of course, unless you're not aware, the complainant in this instance has died. They passed away last year, taking their own life. It's really awful. Which also will put a pin in maybe those sorts of details, but the response from a lot of media now on the supporting Christian Porter front has been very fucked up, because they're in a position where they can't defame the complainant because she's dead. So there's so much that is being said now of just trying to completely discredit her as a person, which they would not get away with if she were alive. So that's a super fucked legal loophole. Just so
the distinction
opinion
that you're making there is it's not possible to have defamed someone if they're no longer alive, right? From a legal defamation standpoint.
Unless you're in Tasmania, unless that law's changed. I think in Tasmania you can defame a dead person, but in most other instances, no, you cannot. At least here in Australia, obviously
you cannot. To make that clear, you cannot be sued
for defamation.
Well, so that, and that's the thing with defamation of rule one of trying to charge someone with defamation. It's sort of is what they said defamatory, and if they're dead, by legal definition, it can't be, and it's kind of fucked in that sort of way. I know it's a lot more complicated than that, but the point is, it means that people can be saying that this woman was a crazy liar if they want, and they just can.
Don't worry, Tom. It's the right-wing media ecosystem. They would have been calling her a crazy liar even if she was alive. It doesn't matter.
Well, yes, but less overtly in that.
But there would have been a potential for consequences for that action.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
Potential for consequences and recourse.
Yeah.
So staying on the press conference, do we think there's two ways? This is probably three in terms of the way this is panned out. He's obviously probably had a media team run over everything with him. So
naturally.
His staff members were allegedly scrubbing mentions of his attendance at the 1988 debate conference in advance of this news sort of breaking out. So, and all that stuff is auditable and traceable. We can see the edits that have been made. We can see the users on Wikipedia that have made them. So, clearly there's been some advance warning of this for him and their team.
So the question is that and same thing with Linda Reynolds to a point. Are their emotional responses real, or are they real but also have they been, shall we say, sculpted to a point by whatever PR unit is.
I think if you're a government minister that's been caught up in this scandal, it would be genuinely terrifying for you and your career. I think there's a distinction, though, as to whether the emotion has been generated as a result of genuine, anger and upset over having been falsely accused, or as a result of anxiety being created at the prospect of losing your job for the thing for which you are legitimately guilty. So I don't know which of those two it is. Yeah. There is genuine emotion happening there. As to how much of it can be genuinely attributed to one cause of another or not, only Christian Porter, only Linda Reynolds know the answers to those questions. To me, it seems like emotional affect. You're sorry at having been caught rather than sorry because you're sorry.
It's like to use another sporting analogy, it's like Steve Smith. Remember how they were cheating a couple of years ago?
Is this the sandpaper with a ball?
Sandpaper on the ball. Anyway, the
cricket ball.
Thing is, when they caught him out and they made him sit in front of the press conference, he cried like a baby.
Yeah,
reading his pre-prepared speech. It was like, yeah, you're just exactly the same thing. You're just sorry you got caught.
Yeah,
it's only when the white of the eyes of the responsibility of whatever that they're facing is right in front of them that they have to go, oh shit.
And it's a popular tactic used by people who are being accused of something to deflect attention away from what they're doing. So if you ever look at the YouTube channel Jim Can't Swim, they dissect criminal interrogations and that sort of stuff as to okay, so this is what this guy's doing here, but obviously because you've got all the details of the fact after the case, you can look back and go, okay, here's where he's lying about this is how he's sort of responding, and this is why he's sort of generating this emotional affect, or this is what someone does when they're backed into a corner and they're trying to sort of outsmart the detective or give an overly long answer to try and distract from what's going on. It really just looking at this press conference reminded me of a Jim Can't Swim video. I was just like, we're going to be looking back at this. As I was watching it, I was like, we're going to be looking back on this historical footage as potentially evidence of something, allegedly.
Now, in terms of skipping on a little bit, in terms of whether the police inquiries to this, right? So obviously there's allegations being made. As we said last week, it was referred to New South Wales and I think the AFP as well. So the AFP said it's not really our jurisdiction, handballed it back to New South Wales. Shortly before this press conference or around the same time, New South Wales came out and said there's actually not enough evidence for us to do anything about it.
Oh, so they've just closed the case.
They've just closed the case. So there wasn't even a case to begin with. They're like, we can't even open a case because there's not enough evidence. Which basically, in terms of the Prime Minister's line, is that, well, there's not enough evidence, so innocent until proven guilty, and let's keep calm and carry on. And Christian Porter's now taken a leave of absence.
And everyone's just very concerned about their mental health all of a sudden. Reinforcing the idea that mental health days are for rich white men under investigation and not anyone else who's suffering from mental illness in the wider public here in Australia. You too can have some mental health leave as long as you're rich and powerful. Part of the thing that really disturbed me about that press conference most of all was that the way he sort of questioned that if he were to be accused or if any of this was to stick, it would be some sort of larger injurious assault on rule of law in general.
Yes.
Speak to that a bit, Tom. I saw you tweeting about that.
Oh my god, yeah, because not only it was weird how the conference sort of shifted. He talked sort of about his understanding of the emotional distress to the woman's family and stuff, not to her emotional distress that she clearly went through, and all that sort of stuff. But I digress. But then also jumped to a thing of making his refusal to stand down and refusing to resign as like being the bastion of the rule of law. That like implying that if someone stands down because of allegations alone, then I think I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something like, then we would be in a lawless society or something like that. Sort of like, oh, if I resign, we become Mad Max. So I'm just not going to do it. Okay?
The only possible outcome.
Because I'm the hero here. Like, I'm still like, just this fear mongering that, oh no, that just any woman could say anything about you and then you're fucked, you're done. Like, no, I'm standing up to stop this from happening, which I would love to call a dog whistle, but it was not subtle enough to be a dog whistle.
Yeah,
it was just a horn. Like, just blaring a horn that, of course, all the dogs will hear and respond to, but also we're aware that it happened, because it's such a clear call for support from all the columnists in which we all know, predominantly News Corp, but all the columnists that are going to now just be writing pieces about how, like, yeah, of course, like, it's totally fucked if just based on allegations alone you can, like, force someone to resign from XYZ position. Like, I don't know, and they're just going to take that and run with it. Horrible.
If you were a member of a private organization, if you just worked at, like, NAB or, like, Commonwealth Bank, as if allegations of sexual impropriety wouldn't be enough for that person to be forced to step aside. Like, like, you need to be criminally found convicted of a thing in order to justify any kind of, like, occupational response.
People's contracts, which are like, if you in any way, like, denigrate the company,
bring down the reputation of the company, like, or like if it was any other area of the economy, if this was just like Christian who worked at Minter Ellison, the law firm or something, like, you'd be done. Like, remember the guy, back in political scandals from years gone by, even just the suggestion of this sort of thing would be enough to get someone to resign. Like, remember the guy who resigned over a bottle of De Bortoli wine? Like, that guy must be looking back going, hey, all I did was take a bottle of wine. I had to resign from my career, but this guy gets to stay. Okay, a credible, detailed allegation of sexual assault with multiple contemporaneous accounts, multiple people were told at the time. Like, it's just, and he's going, okay, well, there's no evidence. You can't prove I'm guilty in a court of law, and therefore there should be no consequences whatsoever. Like, that just seems like an absurdly high, if you're a guy in a workplace and someone accuses you of, like, inappropriate touching, or, like, a HR investigation in a regular workplace would be more thorough and comprehensive and damning than what's happening here. It just is, like, for the highest law officer of the land, he needs to be, like, criminally convicted before anyone can do anything about it. That's an absurd fucking standard.
And that's what people have been calling for, is that there is some sort of independent investigation that looks into this. But obviously the Prime Minister's now turned around and said, oh, that's not going to happen. It's not necessary, blah, blah, blah. And look, I mean, even an independent investigation might not find enough evidence to really do anything. But
criminal conviction, beyond a reasonable doubt, is not the standard for losing your job. Okay? It might be the case for a criminal conviction.
Yes.
But we're not asking for that. All we're asking is someone independently reviews the allegations. Like, if it was... Anyway.
His argument of, I'm defending the rule of law or otherwise we'll be in a lawless society, it's the same thing as all the free speech complaints, right? Like, it would only be violating those things if suddenly the AFP turned up, handcuffed you, and threw you in a gulag.
Right.
Like, that would be turning it all into a lawless account. But no, in this instance, we're demanding due process to at least look into it. That's the bar we're going for here.
Yeah, it is quite literally the very least we can do is fucking look into it.
There would be people that would have been around at that conference that would have memories of those events, even if it was...
The litany of friends of this woman who can at least, like, give statements. Like, I've seen some of them, like, they're not being anonymous, because obviously there's rules around naming her, but, like, people who say they are friends of hers who were, like, told about it at the time, they are coming out and they are speaking. Like, this letter was sent, I know they said an anonymous letter, but it was sent by people who cared, at least, and yet, like, just look into it. Like, just to think that your highest law officer.
Yeah.
Just the suggestion of that.
And that's the key thing, is that it's not just Joe Blow from NAB. You've the position of Attorney General, which, among other things, has the ability to hire and fire judges, for instance. That should be a position above reproach.
Above reproach, yes. And I think you're right, Tom. There's something really super insidious about making it yet another battle in the culture wars. Like, if we do this, what's next? Coon cheese? Like, it's really not. They're going to start renaming all the Dr. Seuss books. Oh no, what are we going to do? Like, it really, like, it is so insulting to reduce it to that level of complexity, and it really is just a bullhorn just for the Christian Porter's doing there, just and then Miranda Devine, her ears prick up over at News Corp headquarters. She goes, "I am being summoned." Like, like it is this. It's so utterly offensive that the chief law officer of the land is turning like what should be an investigation into his conduct into just like yet another fucking battle in the dumb culture wars. Like it's like every moment that I spend thinking and talking about this story, I just want to like scream at the screen.
Oh,
like,
yeah, it's just to boil it down to like, it's one thing. Like, I guess because we've seen this a million times. It's one thing for there to be allegations of rape. The person who's alleged says, like, no, I'm innocent. And then there's just that fight, right? That, as Peter Dutton would put it, a he said, she said kind of situation, which is fucked in its own very special way.
Setting aside corrupt cop Peter Dutton's fucking, baseless fucking sophomoric analysis of these events.
Of that, to have, oh God, you guys are frozen. Am I just talking over everybody?
No, you're all good, man.
Oh, no, we're all good. Yay. But yeah, on top of that, just that shit fight, to then just throw in, oh, and by the way, by me doing this, I'm actually a hero.
Yes.
It's sickening. It's so fucking sickening.
It's that white male privilege, as it were. I guess the thing is like, why? Everyone's like, oh, well, she could be lying. And it's like, well, why? Why would she write the letter and tell her closest friends? Like, why would she do that? Do you know what I mean? Like,
anyone is that vindictive. Like, when you see what people who come forward with allegations like this go through, the media scrutiny, the things that are said about them, everything, they are like dragged through the mud, and it's fucked, and they aren't believed, and it's just disgusting and life ruining beyond the trauma of going through the assault. I don't think anyone is vindictive enough to make that up and go through that for the person who they're alleging to not have their life ruined anyway, because they're staying in the job and everything's fine.
Has it happened that there have been false accusations? Yes, I'm sure it has. Like, there are people out there that believe in flat Earth. There are like, some people are just mentally ill, right? That does exist, where it's like, but the amount of people that it would be that would falsely accuse someone like this with so comprehensive level of detail and contemporaneous accounts and have it documented, and like, not just that, but have evidence of having been in the same place at the same time as the perpetrator, and like
and with it seems 30-year long con.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like
that's the key thing.
The amounts of like the possibility of that being a false accusation to me seems like vanishingly small. I just don't see it. Which is to say, I don't believe Christian Porter, but I can't just come out and say that I don't believe him, because the fuck of it is, the absolute like major frustration with all of this is that I, as someone commentating in public about this, actually need to be more careful than even he is about this whole situation, so we don't get fucking sued for defamation against him or something like that. Never mind all of these atrocious things that they're saying about his accuser. Like, all of those things, that's all fine and legally permitted, but we have to sort of tiptoe on eggshells around this to make sure that if this clip got into the hands of someone, that we don't get fucking sued out of existence by even just talking about the allegation. Like, it's just, Sorry, you're trying to say something, Em.
I was nodding.
Oh, you're just
Right.
nodding in agreement.
No, and it makes me think, like, as the broader conversation that's been going on around this, and I know it's kind of, I'm very aware that it's like, I'm a man, I'm talking to two men, and we're gonna solve this problem. It's like, no, I know it's wild, and, like, my input on this is, like, the least important. But my partner and I, Alice and I, were talking about this the other day, just because of what can be done about, like, what's the solution here in terms of, like, because this is always how allegations of this nature happen, right? Like, as assault of this nature it isn't the same as almost every other kind of crime. And the way that the burden of proof and the, innocent till proven guilty and all the fundamental beliefs we have of law work, like, when applied to particularly historical allegations, don't quite, like, it doesn't quite work. And that's how people get away with it. They've gotten away with it for millennia and all that sort of stuff. And I feel a big change that could be made, it's not so much in a legal sense, but just in a societal sense, that we treat crimes like this similarly to how we treat something like theft or murder, in that what we always seem to do when someone comes out and says that someone's raped them or assaulted them or any of that sort of stuff is it becomes about whether or not they were raped at all, rather than proving who did it. So, because, when you've got thievery or a murder, it's not like, if someone's been murdered, we accept as a fact that someone has been murdered.
Yes.
And then it's, can you prove beyond a reasonable doubt that John Smith was the person who killed them? Whilst when it comes to people being assaulted, it's always just like, oh, well, no, like, what were they wearing? Or, like, what kind of signals were they giving? Or were they intoxicated? Or did they just regret having sex with this person?
You're right.
Like,
it is one of the few
the
kinds
crime
of
happened.
Yes, it is one of the few kinds of crime where it's like, if you tell people about it, they will question its existence. It's like comedy. Like, like, it's one of those few art forms where it's like, people will question if it is the thing that it is if you're doing it badly. They're like, is this comedy? If I'm not laughing? So it's is this a crime if, did it even exist? Did it even happen if I can't sort of prove the whole sort of...
And given the
that's
burden
a clumsy
of
analogy,
evidence,
but you know what I'm saying.
and given the burden of evidence and all that sort of stuff that's on it, because, like, unless the moment after it's happened, you've gone to get forensics swabs and all that sort of stuff, like the actual concrete evidence that people would expect in a murder trial or something like that isn't always there. So I think just I don't have all the answers, but I feel a good first step would be that when someone says that they have been raped, we at least accept as a fact that they were. And then it's a matter of, is there the evidence or the testimony and all that sort of stuff to say that it was this person who did it, or did someone else do it? And like it'd be a baby step that I think just needs to happen, because everyone at this point, Christian Porter coming out to deny that he did anything seems to be being taken as that they weren't assaulted at all, and that's what the conversations become. Yeah,
it's a complete erasure of the victim and their story and their experience. It's not just, I didn't do this thing to you. It's, this thing never happened to you. Like,
Well, that's for literally anything else. We accept it.
I think, it's something similar to what I was saying, I think, last week before about, once you get into the beyond reasonable doubt side of things and how you treat it like a normal crime, it's difficult with these kind of cases because, as you said, there isn't the baseline to which to start from can jump around, because people will, they'll say either it didn't, they'll argue around it. Whereas if someone's dead, there is a body. But I don't know. I don't know whether or not the legal system can catch up with that without bending some of its basic principles. But
that's why I don't think maybe that's a legal precedent to set per se, but just more as, I hate to bust out this statement, but as a society, we should look at it like
it is a cultural lesson that we have continued to not learn over decades. Like that.
That cried wolf kind of thing where we don't believe that there's because throughout the sort of the history of like Western society where we've questioned people's claims before for this kind of thing, where now we've gotten to a rhythm of like, oh well.
I hate to use this term because I think it's a bit loaded, but it's the patriarchy, right? Like it is a situation where we have a systemic bias towards men and men's perceptions and men's thoughts and men's feelings, and we don't consider the thoughts of women's feelings or thoughts or allegations with the same gravitas and the same seriousness. It is a broader cultural problem that we are still, even now, not successfully addressing. And I don't know what the solution to that is. I don't know if everyone needs to go stare at Georgia O'Keeffe paintings for longer. Like, I don't know what the remedy is in order to make us less of a sexist society. But like, it is incumbent upon us, I guess, as younger men, right? Younger generations of men, and men who will have our own kids and have our own sons and daughters, to sort of make sure that these lessons stick. Like, I look at the older generation of men that preceded us, and they're woeful on a lot of these fucking metrics. Like, and I don't think that it's because we're spectacular and they weren't. I think just
a shift.
Progress takes time.
Yeah.
Progress takes time, and it's generational. And I think there are certain members of the older previous generation that they're in their 60s, they're in their 70s, they're locked in their ways. They're not changing shit at this point. They're going to vote LNP, and they're going to, make hubba hubba noises when a hot chick walks past. And those people are they're kind of trash. And they're not going to change their ways, and maybe we shouldn't expect them to. Maybe it's not reasonable to expect someone who's like baked in at like 75 to like all of a sudden turn around and start becoming a radical feminist. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, these people are just kind of trash, and we just need to move on from them. And
that's the key tenet of conservative government as well, isn't it? That
everything's perfect. Don't change. Everything's great.
Change, if it does happen, is slow and tedious.
But I am reassured by the fact that within the space of a single generation, since the 60s and 70s, we've had a massive change in terms of civil rights, in terms of women's rights, in terms of 100 years ago women couldn't vote. So like from a grand scale, time scale of things are progressing quite quickly compared to the last 2000 years.
Progressed in the last 10 years.
So I am seeing it. I do see it. I see the pace of change accelerating. I think for those of us who are growing up, it is still frustratingly slow. But when you take the longer view of human history, you'll see that it is actually quite rapid. And that's probably the thing the things that are causing all of these culture wars and all of this instability around polarization is because of the rapidity of these changes. Which are welcome changes, but obviously it causes other instability and other issues when you try and buck things too quickly.
Yeah.
One thing that got me the other day in terms of that scale of change, and I sort of had to pause for a moment and think, well, am I one of the old people that won't change in this instance? But it was a Taylor Swift issue. But so basically, there's a sitcom on Netflix in America, which
I think I heard about this. Yeah.
Basically, there's a line in one of the episodes where it was the mother and the daughter arguing about, or sisters, or two females arguing about something, and one of the lines is, "What do you care? You go through men faster than Taylor Swift." So, sort of innocuous maybe from my perspective at first glance, but then Taylor Swift, obviously, the reason why it's in the news is Taylor Swift responded to that. And was like, hey, 2010, you can take back your sexist.
That's really shitty. A thing to say about someone. Yeah.
And of course, everyone now in the culture wars has gone, Taylor Swift. And they've just started slamming the TV show and the writers and everything else. And I was like, oh, that seems like it's just a joke. But then it's funny because, sometimes as a white male, you don't really have that perspective of like, well, the issue isn't. The issue is the connotation about whether or not someone's dating history, sexuality, or whatever is good or bad. And in that instance, they're saying that it's bad, and that's the context that's being put in. And whereas you look at the flip side of it, like Joey from Friends, is it Barney from
Hey.
How I Met Your Mother or whatever
Neil Patrick Harris's
who are
character.
going through women and celebrated for going through women.
Yeah, promiscuity for men is encouraged.
Oh yeah, and that's the oldest double standard in the book, right?
But it's an interesting point you raised there actually about Taylor Swift, Adam, which is not a sentence I thought I'd ever utter on this show, but there you go. It's also about how we as a society, it sort of feeds back into the larger point I was making earlier, is that how we as a society are acculturated to treat women, how we are treated to view women. And it's like, what do I actually know about Taylor Swift? It was one of those, I think it was the You're Wrong About podcast where they sort of made a point like, what do you actually know about Anne Hathaway other than you hate her? Like, and like, what do you actually know about these women that the media?
Hathaway. What? People have an issue with Anne Hathaway?
The media that just like teaches us to hate certain women, but it's like, what the fuck do I actually know about Britney Spears? What the fuck do I actually know about Anne Hathaway or Taylor Swift or whatever? And I sat down and I watched an interview with Taylor Swift, and you know what? She's fucking lovely. And she seems like a really nice person and a very talented musician. And I don't understand why this whole section of the internet hates her. And I kind of like, not that I hated her, I didn't really think that much about it, but I was kind of like, oh, Taylor Swift, like she's annoying or whatever. That was the level of, but I realized that was a narrative that had been fed to me by a certain section of the media, and I just kind of imbibed it and didn't question it. It's like this is an example of like the way culture encourages us to feel about women. Yeah. And if you're not critical, if you don't step back and think about it, you'll just go along with it because that's what everyone does. Like, who's got the time to think about, like, how do I really feel about Taylor Swift? How do I really feel about Miley Cyrus? What do I actually know about these people? Like, who's bothering to do that?
Back to your point, though, like, that that realization, that sort of, learning experience is one that we've made, like, in 2010, if you'd put that to me, I would have probably strongly resisted or something. You know what I mean? Like, in 10 years, that jump has started to shift. And I feel like 10 years there's been a lot that's changed. The Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, all this stuff has really come to fruition over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and it's going to keep pushing. I guess the question is really in the culture wars is, if we do try to change too quickly, does that then just segregate a whole section of the internet into their own?
Do you have a backlash?
Rather than listening and learning, they just go and go over and start a capital insurrection or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and certainly whenever there is progress, there is backlash. We saw that with Obama and Trump. We saw that with the election of Joe Biden, and as you say, the insurrection at the Capitol. So that shouldn't be an excuse for not making progress. I guess the argument then becomes, how do we create progress in such a way that is inclusive and brings people along for the ride,
rather than with you on the journey?
Rather than in a way that's oppositional. And I recently was gifted a book for my 30th birthday, which I think delves into this topic further, by Ezra Klein, called Why We're So Polarized, which basically talks about how the American electorate specifically has gotten more entrenched and more polarized over the last sort of 30, 40 years, and sort of why that's happened. So part of it's economic, part of it's social, part of it's political. It's one of those.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. We're not going to solve it in one podcast, let alone one book.
Beware of linear histories, or whatever the lecture was we had in first year uni.
Was this the lecture that really? I remember. I think I was sitting next to you, Adam, when that lecture was happening, and I think the lecturer said something really critical about Anzac Day, and I remember feeling you tense up, because I remember back then you were very much more on the how dare you shit on our Anzacs, or criticize Anzac Day sort of thing, and I was like, this is a big awakening sort of moment.
There's
that's probably the most fundamental, the most important lecture I think I ever had at university. I think that.
Well, sort of explain a little bit about the content, Adam.
Well, so basically it was a theatre histories lecture, and it was the second lecture we had. The first one was just an introduction to this is university.
What is performance?
What is performance? So basically the lecture came in and then just said, I'm going to talk to you about the black armband view of Australian history. I'd never heard of it. And he just started talking about how Captain Cook was a fucking worse than Hitler. the Anzacs were all like,
shat on by the British, I believe the term was. Yeah,
Anzac days are fucking like beat up, and something else about obviously you talk about the Aboriginals and being murdered and all this kind of stuff, and
a very oppositional.
He said something like that we're all wading knee deep in the blood of the indigenous culture that was wiped out by Captain Cook, who is up there with Hitler as in terms of history's greatest murderers. And I was like, wow, what a sentence. Like, god damn. And then like that we have our annual celebratory day of mateship is the day that we were shat on by the British and sent out as cannon fodder in someone else's war. I mean, all guns are blazing.
He wasn't entirely wrong, but it's all a matter of perspective, right? Like I definitely see the perspective that like Captain Cook, was obviously responsible for a litany of horrors, and I also see the perspective of like he found, was part of the reason that this nation was founded, and this nation has done a lot of good things. So like you can sort of, as long as I feel like it's good to get that, as you say, the black armband view of history, so you can sort of look critically and see both sides of every story, not to just uncritically accept the history that's fed to you. That history was a bunch of linear, white men doing great things on atop of mountains, striding manfully towards a purposeful objective, and then it's succeeding immediately. Like that is not how real life works. That's
and we
the
were
lesson.
supposed to apply that to our research when researching the historical context of characters and plays.
Right.
Well, it has broader implications.
Yes, it has broader implications, like so many artistic endeavors, which is almost like we should be funding them.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of funding, going to change subject here, so we've been talking for a little bit. There's a bill currently in the US that's trying to be passed.
Just a bill here on Capitol Hill.
A bill, Capitol Hill, getting knocked around between the...
I'm a $1.9 trillion bill.
Just keep going. And 10 more minutes. Okay, or not. Fuck you guys. Anyway, so obviously the bill we're talking about is the $1.9 trillion, and that's trillion with a T, coronavirus relief bill, which is one of Joe Biden's core election promises, basically. So they were debating that in the Senate, and the Republicans, even though they don't have the majority anymore, were doing their hardest to stop and be just what's what I'm looking for? Be
obstructionist shitheads, I believe, otherwise known as being a Republican.
Yeah.
So Tom, you mentioned a meme before the show, which I think sort of encapsulates it nicely in terms of how, like, when Democrats are winning, they still can't win. What was that again? With the Emperor Palpatine.
That people would say that, the Democrats, when they're in the minority, and the photo was, if you've seen Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, when Emperor Palpatine is pretending to be all meek and defenseless before Mace Windu comes to kill him or whatever, saying, oh no, I'm too weak. And it's like, oh, but the Democrats, when they're in the majority, they're like, oh, I'm too weak to do anything. But when there's like good legislation or they're trying to stop Bernie Sanders doing something, they have unlimited power and the lightning fingers that happens a second later. It was a good meme. Visually describing memes makes them sound really shit.
No, it does. You can't take the wind out of it a little bit.
I think it
ruins the impact.
But that's a perfect example, I think, of what the situation is with the Democrats. When Republicans are in power, they can seem to pass everything all day long with 50 votes, and nobody gives a shit in the Senate. When the Democrats are in, it's just like, oh, it needs to be done once a year through this arcane Byzantine process of a Rube Goldberg machine of legislation and budget reconciliation, and we can only do it once a year. Like, the Democrats, when they're in power, they need 60 votes to do anything. When Republicans are in power, they need 50 votes and a snifter of courage, and they're up and away legislating. Like, it just seems so fucking frustrating that Democrats need to work twice as hard to get half as much done, and all the Republicans need to do is just hit the brakes on everything that they do. It's bullshit.
Do you think it's a bit of a generalization, though? Like, it's become a cliche more than anything now than necessarily...
So, for a callback, The Simpsons made a joke about this in literally 1997, where they're like, Democratic convention was like, We
when
what is it?
Stampy the elephant is on
Yes.
the loose, and Stampy the elephant just bursts into the Democratic National Convention, and they've all got banners that says "We can't govern."
Yes.
And they're all cheering, and then
We hate each other and ourselves.
ourselves, and we can't govern. And then Stampy the elephant enters the Republican National Convention. It says, "We're just plain evil."
Yes. But like
And,
that's been a running joke since the 90s that the like Republicans are the bad guys. It's like, yeah, and I think it's kind of this very naive framing of like Republicans bad, Democrats good. It's kind of a third level
Very
analysis,
lefty,
which isn't really the case. It's more like Republicans bad, Democrats less bad, and the only viable choice. Like that's really the calculus there. Like it just seems like, I don't know, they'll promise $2,000 checks. That sort of got negotiated down to $1,400 because $1,400 plus the $600 that was already in there sort of adds up to $2,000, and like, oh, we're definitely going to have a $15 minimum wage. Like, and just because of a handful of senators, Mitch McConnell can whip the votes out of fucking anything. They had a literal insurrection, fascism day at the Capitol. The Republicans, and yet Mitch McConnell fell in line afterwards, just like all the other Republican senators, and said, "Yeah, I would support Trump's run for the 2024 nomination." Meanwhile, the Democrats are like, "Hey, can we do this thing that we ran on and won on with our majority?" And then like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are like, "I want to get Republican credit by watering it down and making it shit and terrible instead." It's like, no one. Who's going to give you credit, Joe Manchin? Who are you looking to impress? Who are you looking to please? You're a Democrat, aren't you? You got a D in front of your name. Vote for the Democrat plan, you prick.
Something 2024. So they were debating the bill in the Senate, and there's a senator called Ron Johnson.
From Wisconsin.
Who
Not
decided
to be mistaken with John Ronson.
John Ronson, Scron Monson, all of the above. I don't know what it is.
John Ronson is an author, if I'm not much mistaken. He wrote the psychopath test and The Men Who Stare at Goats.
Good movie and book. So what he did, because there's only a few things they can do, but there are certain tactics you can do to draw things out and make them inconvenient and whatever else. So they decided to force the reading of the bill on the Senate floor, which, you'd think, well, okay, they're going to read a bill.
I was like, of course you got to read the bill. You got to know what you're voting on, right?
Yeah, but that's fine if it's like 6 pages or something. This $1.9 trillion relief package is a bit more complicated than that. It's actually
how
600.
much more complicated? What, 20 pages?
Up a little bit.
50 pages.
Keep going.
150 pages.
No, it's 628 pages.
Oof, and I bet it's in really tiny font too.
Yeah. So there's staff, not the politicians, mind you, staff who have to sit there, and based on the wishes of the members, and then to have to read it out. In full.
Which an important point to note there, Adam, that Ron Johnson from Wisconsin didn't stay during this readout of the vote. He was like, yeah, cool. If you guys could just read it out, I'm just going to go and fucking be anywhere else. Cheers. Thanks, cunts. I'm not going to stay and actually hear the content of the bill because I'm not interested in that. The whole point was just to delay the effect of the bill taking place by 10 to 11 hours and ruin everyone's fucking day in the process. On Madison.com, Ron Johnson says, no decision on his 2022 run, but leaving office is, quote, probably my preference now. We're here to tell you, John, here to tell you, Ron, it's also our preference as well.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders had a little quip as he left the chamber. He says, good thing we have time during a national emergency to do this.
Well, because it's also this ties into a larger issue that's going on in American politics about the filibuster.
Yeah.
Because as I understand it, I only learned this recently, that the filibuster is actually only allowed in certain proceedings.
Correct.
There have been changes to their parliamentary policy or whatever where you can't filibuster in certain instances. And it seems to be that it was the Republicans who were super like, oh yeah, you can't filibuster in all these areas where it would benefit them if they can just steamroll through policy. But anything that they want to stall, the filibuster's allowed. But I'm assuming in this context, a filibuster would not have been allowed. So this is another strategy to try and like wear people down to delay it being voted on, is let's make it take 10 hours to hear the fucking legislation.
I just don't understand why Republicans want to die on this hill. Like, this is a bill, what's it called? The Recovery Act?
Something like that.
Yeah. The bill has like 60 to 77% support, depending on who you ask. Like, even like a significant majority of Republicans support this bill. Like 7 out of 10 Americans support it. Like, why are you opposed to this bill, which is unequivocally
literally giving you free money,
giving people money to, and it's not just that, it's to not die during a pandemic, to fund the recovery, to fund vaccine distribution, to fund education so schools can open up sooner. Like, it does all the things that you say that you care about, and the only reason you're voting against it, they all voted against it, by the way, every single Republican voted against it.
Except one, right? But
no, he was just away.
Honestly, I thought he pressed the wrong button.
No, he was absent.
That's the thing I saw. I need to look this up because I heard that you talk amongst yourself.
So it did pass. It was 50 to 49, and there was one absentee.
Yeah, all of which is to say, like, it's like beyond the blatant hypocrisy of like, these are all largely measures that you, when you were in government a year ago, supported and gave money to, like the Recovery Act, whatever it was a year ago, is basically like that they all voted for, all of these Republicans, initiated the programs that this bill is now extending. Like, the vast majority of the funding in this bill is topping up additional funding or more funding for programs that were already in existence. So, like, aside from all the rank hypocrisy of that, to just like delay help to people who need it during the course of a pandemic / economic crisis, even though you know it's not going to work, like, I don't know. There's just something disgusting, man. I don't know. We're just plain evil, right? That's really should be the banner. The Simpsons called it.
Apologies. Allow me to correct what I said. I mixed up my legislation. So no, in this past week, the House passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which had some sweeping reforms, policing reforms, and it was like a vote between like all Democrats voted for it and all Republicans voted against it, except one Republican voted for the bill, who then later said, I accidentally pressed the wrong voting button and realized it too late.
Too late, it's done.
And said, I have changed the official record to reflect my opposition to the partisan George Floyd Policing Act. Oh yeah, wow. The one Republican who voted with police reform did it by mistake, apparently.
The thing I don't understand is,
I don't know what's worse. What's worse is that they're like super against this sort of thing, or that they're so incompetent that they pressed yes instead of no. Like, what's worse?
The Republican Party does not stand for anything right now. All they have is the culture wars. This is all they have left. This is why the ratings of Fox News have cratered since Trump has been out of office. It's why MSNBC and other actual news outlets are now number one in the ratings, is because what they're delivering is substantive information about policy and COVID recovery and things that are actually happening, rather than just culture wars nonsense. All they have under their belt is culture wars nonsense, plus Trump, plus whatever racial wedge issue horseshit. They don't stand for anything. They don't have a policy platform to vote up or down. They are just now the party of saying no to things, and that's where they're comfortable. That's where they lived during the Obama years, was just saying no to whatever he wanted, even if it was stuff that they otherwise would have wanted previously, like nominations like Merrick Garland for the Supreme Court. Like, largely everyone all agreed, totally centrist pick. Like, we all can get around this guy. A lot of Republicans really like him because of his work on terrorism from a judicial standpoint. Like, everyone had massive respect for this guy. In any other, universe, they would have voted for him 10 times over. But they said no. Why? Because he was Obama's guy. Like, it really is just as simple as that. The Republicans are the party of no.
I guess the question is really what they'll do over the next 2 years and sort of where they'll, a lot of opposition parties, whether it be in Australia or US, Britain, whatever, once they become the opposition and they're out in the wilderness, it takes them a while to find their groove again. Sometimes you have effect, like for instance, when the Liberals became opposition back when Labor took power in Australia, they were a really effective opposition because they worked out a strategy pretty quickly, and the Labor Party kicked a few own goals as well. So,
just a few.
The lefties over here are just as good as the lefties over in the United States, and when it comes to kicking own goals, certainly. But that's exactly the same playbook. The same conservative strategy is you get Murdoch on your side, you have a media apparatus that blasts the other side no matter what they do, and you just attack, and deny. You don't work on any bipartisan. You deny them any victory of any sort whatsoever. You wait until people become disenchanted with the political process and say politics doesn't work. We need a firebrand. We need a fire. We need a Trump. We need someone who's going to come in here and blow things up and get things moving again. And who are we going to vote in? Well, not the guys who are currently in power. We'll vote for the other guys because the government's not working with these current guys, right? So if you just take away the incentive for people to work in a bipartisan way of, for any reason whatsoever, you're going to get the same outcome. It's just the Democrats don't have the audacity to shoot the hostage. Democrats won't put a gun against the head of the American people and pull the trigger because it fucks over the other party. The Republicans will, and they will every time, and that's why they'll win every time, is because they have I don't want to say balls because it makes it sound like a virtue, but they have the pig-headedness to follow through on their threats and deny advantage to the other side, even if it helps the country, even if it helps people in their own districts, they'll still say no. Like with Obamacare, they were like, yeah, I could get all this free funding for my state for Obamacare, for Medicare expansion and all this sort of stuff, and I'm not going to take it because fuck my own citizens, I guess. Fuck my own people at the expense of the other guy.
Which is probably a way that's manifested. Perhaps would be the example of Texas to a point at this with
in the most recent example,
the energy system over there as well as Ted Cruz.
Oh yeah, how they all love let's have an energy system that's independent from everyone else because freedom.
How good is freedom, guys? All those people that died because of the cold snap because they couldn't heat their houses. Super free.
Certainly keeps you warm at night.
And on that note, we've been Unnatural Selection.
We have. I would I know we talked a lot about some upsetting things earlier, and I would like to just give some information for... and we've got a comment coming in, and have the privately jacked prices.
Yes, people in Texas have been getting hit with some insane electricity bills because, it's just in their whole let's be free of regulation, they're completely unregulated and they can do whatever the fuck they want because, the free market's great, isn't it?
Yeah, as someone who's an occasional listener of the Dollop, whenever they talk about the free market in 100 years or 200 years past, and they're just and so the newspaper giants just paid street boys 3 cents a day to deliver the newspapers. This is what capitalism does if it's completely unregulated and left to its own devices. Union busting and people bashing in people's heads in order to maximize profit of the billionaires at the expense of everyone else. A well-regulated everything is the best, always everything. Free market by itself is not going to solve problems just for the sake of it.
Yes. And so the same comment at Monica's TV just chimed in as well, saying that they're in Texas and luckily haven't had any problems with pricing. But there are people at the mercy of ERCOT and stuff like that. So no, hope you're safe and well, and hope you and yours are all right. It's fucking awful what's happening over there. I mean, and we've seen our fair share of climate change disasters happening here in Australia as well. So it's terrible. So please stay safe.
To Monica's, can I say I'm profoundly sorry for our chief export that's made this much worse for you guys, Rupert Murdoch. I did want to. Just sort of because we were talking about the sexual assault stuff earlier, I do want to mention a few things. Obviously, if any of that's upsetting to people and they need to seek help, obviously here in Australia we have the National Sexual Assault, Family and Domestic Violence Counselling line at 1800 737 732, and also as always you can if you need help with any of this stuff, you can speak to someone at Lifeline as well. So that's 131114 on the phone and lifeline.org.au. I would lastly sort of really encourage before we hop off. I know we're like three white dudes talking about this. I would really encourage you as a listener to seek out like female voices talking about these issues and these, like we can offer a perspective, but it is obviously limited to some extent by our lived experience. So, I would encourage you to, if you like, listen to female commentators that are talking about these sorts of things. Here in Australia, Annabelle Crabb and Lee Sales, I always find like Emma Alberici, like indispensable sources of wisdom on various issues, female journalists that we have here in Australia. So, and don't be that guy on Insiders this morning. What was his name from Channel 10?
Oh, I didn't see this.
Peter Van Olsen, where he was just talking about like how much sympathy he sort of had for people who had been falsely accused. I was just like, don't be that guy. If someone asks you at the end of a panel about sexual assault and you've got two other female panelists with you, just say, hey, maybe listen to what these guys have to say as opposed to me, as opposed to sympathizing with the accuser. Thanks, Peter. We have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist that are ruining the face of the planet at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen.
And let's all just try and be a bit better. Hey,
get a bit better.
Just a little bit.
Facebook, Twitter, great new IP. I think that we could,
Twister. You're saying?
Yeah, Facebook Twister. So I don't know how that would work. Just sounds good. Let's just put a pin in that. We'll come back to it.
We'll take the whole poking someone to a whole new level.
Can you still do that?
I don't know. It got dumb really quick.
Are you still allowed to poke people? That seems very not 20.
Inappropriate.
Yeah. Given the context of the discussion that we've just had, maybe, hey, Facebook, if the poke feature is still a thing, maybe rethink that. Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.